Welcome to At Home Rehab's Occupational Therapy Visit Note Training. Before watching this video, you should have already reviewed the printed basic guidance and the sample visit note with examples. Jen's going to review how the clinician who enters the first note will enter information that will carry over to all future notes. In addition, she's going to go over how the notes will be completed at each of your future visits. I'm now going to turn the microphone over to Jennifer, who's going to take you right into the visit note.
If you have not read the general guidance sheet as well as the sample note, please stop this recording and continue it after you've done so. I wanted to first mention that one change that's going to occur with the new notes is that the clinical information is no longer going to be on the OASIS. The OASIS will simply be an administrative, non-billable form. A separate note will be done on the day of OASIS, and since notes need to be completed by midnight of the same day, that note will be completed. The information from that note will populate the plan of care, and it will allow for continuity of care on to visit number 2 so that all of that information is available to the occupational therapist on the next visit. The first section is history of present illness. This will be filled out by the OT on the first visit, and I recommend putting the diagnoses on the top, just listing the diagnoses, and then continuing with a summary of what happened to the patient. In that summary, you can start with how they were prior to their change in their functional or medical status, and then describe what the change was and why they need our services, and what we are going to do to get them back to either their prior functional status or their maximum potential, considering what their medical limitations are and their diagnoses. The next section, which will populate to the plan of care, is the frequency and duration with start date. Here, on the first visit, you're going to put exactly what you think that patient needs. Please avoid wide ranges. Auditors do not like to see this on there, as it applies to a group of patients and not just one particular patient that you're treating. Really sit down and think about what this actual patient that you're treating needs, and be very specific like the examples that I have provided. If you do provide a range, for example, 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, try to make the range very narrow, and you need to start with the longest duration of that range and go down. So if you say 2 to 3, then you need to start with 3 times a week and move down to 2. Anything outside of the ranges that you provide should have a missed visit in that box. The orders, if you have a new order during the care, you will need to write a separate physician order and then also change it on this note so it carries forward to the next note. Under homebound reason, in the past, we have been filling out these generic statements such as unable to leave the home unassisted. That statement can apply to a large group of patients, and the Medicare now wants to see more specific statements. So I suggest on every patient checking off other and putting a patient-specific detail in there. Something from your note, maybe if they need max assist of 2 persons to stand up because their knees buckle and they fall to the chair if they're not supported. Something like that that's going to detail exactly what's going on with this patient in relation to their diagnoses and their care plan. As far as vital signs, I recommend taking pre and post vital signs if there is any concern. You want to protect your medical license and you want to document accurately. You should not be putting SpO2 or blood sugar readings unless the patient has their own machine and they took it themselves and you're recording it. So you want to detail vital signs following exertion, what they did. So I wouldn't write just after walking. I would write after they walked 20 feet, this is what their vital signs were. Under the orders section, the first note is going to populate the plan of care. So the first note in each episode will populate the plan of care. And again, you want to be specific. You want to think about liability. If you're going to use weights with that patient, make sure you specify that you're going to use weights and resistance. Because if you don't specify that and you do use weights and the patient gets hurt, it is a liability for the agency and for yourself as an individual. If you need to change these orders after the first visit, you need to actually write a separate physician order and then also update it in your current note. In the subjective section, you must document the most relevant statement to your care plan and your goals. So the patient may say a lot of things during your visit. I feel great, I'm happy, things like that. If they're just general statements that don't apply to what you're working on, definitely document the most relevant statement, even if the caregiver said it, somebody involved in their care. If you're working on going up and down the steps, or you're working on, say, putting their shoes on, and the caregiver said, oh, yesterday they tied their shoes for the first time on their own, that would be a great statement. For the exercise program, you definitely want to be very specific with frequency, intensity, time, and type. Not just performed upper extremity exercises. You need to specify what type of exercise it was, how many reps, how much weight you used. Under new education and instruction, you want to document all the education you did with that patient during that visit, specifically, not just a general statement, but exactly how you educated to them. And if you did some education from the admission workbook, which I'm hoping that you're doing, you can refer to a page in the admission workbook and you can say that you instructed them on that specific topic, and you can refer to admission workbook since the patient does that in their home. If you did any kind of teach back or carryover, you can write the percentages of verbal cues needed, the percentages that they had carryover. So be specific and detailed to show progress. Under the notable progress section, you want to write the objective progress toward goals. Avoid generic statements like progressing or tolerating well. What you write must be individual to the patient and not apply to multiple patients. So you might want to write that for the first time today, the patient used the commode with minimal assistance, with 20% verbal cues for safe technique. For the first time in 6 months, the patient demonstrated carryover for toileting hygiene. You want to note that, hey, this patient showed some type of improvement. The notable progress section does not have to be long. It just has to be objective and individualized. If they did not make progress, then there you want to write why they're not making progress. What are their limitations? What are their barriers? And how does it carry through with my plan of care? Under the plan, you want to avoid statements like continue or continue per orders. You want to state exactly what you're planning on doing the next visit. It does not have to be everything. It could be 1 or 2 things that you're going to focus on. And you want to write the date if you know the date that you're going back. If you don't know the exact date, you can just put will return in 2 to 3 days, etc. For the specific plan. Under care plan, you want to outline any changes to the plan, including orders and goals. Care communication, you want to detail who you spoke to during this visit and put the details of the conversation. Again, this will protect your medical license. The next section is the chart, and this is brand new. This is a new detail that has been added. So I'm going to go across one row of the chart and explain how you fill it out. So on the evaluation, the evaluating therapist will fill out the prior status and the status on evaluation. Current status can be left blank on the evaluation. So prior status, for example, if they had a stroke, your prior status is going to be what their status was prior to that change. So say their strength was a 5 out of 5 before they had that stroke. That's what will go there. Be as specific as possible, which extremity their pain was in, where their pain was. The status on eval should be the status within the 24-hour period prior to your evaluation. So if you were there at 8 a.m. in the morning and they had a certain amount of pain at 8 last night, then you're going to document that. Their current status, again, should be left blank. Short-term goals and long-term goals should be what you think that patient is going to be or what realistically their potential is at the end. So in the long term, say you think that they're going to achieve a strength of 4 out of 5. So you would write that goal, and you would write the date that you think they're going to achieve that goal. For the short-term goal, again, either split it in half or decide a term for that, maybe 2 weeks from your evaluation that you think they're going to reach it, and put the date. The auditors are no longer going to be approving charts unless they have short-term and long-term goals. Please note that in the goal section, you need to write specifically what it's for. So on prior status, status on eval, and current status, you can just write 5 out of 5, 3 plus out of 5, something like that. But in the goals, you have to write strength, 4 minus out of 5, in order to be able to transfer. Because that goal is going to go to your plan of care, and it needs to read like a sentence on the plan of care, or they're not going to know what you're referring to in the goals section. So all of the rows are filled out similarly to that on each item. So each task you will address how they are on that specific task. So the second part of the chart does detail ADLs, where the first part of the chart is strength and things like that. So you want to address all the things that apply to your specific patient. You do not have to fill in every row of the chart, just the ones that apply to your patient. And at the bottom, there are some blank rows. You can fill in what you want there. If you did any special tests that you want to document across the row, you can fill those in on your eval and then continue on. As you continue on through the notes, you're going to have carryover for all these columns, and you can make changes to your goals, etc., and then write in the narrative section what changes you made. If the goal was met, right in front of the goal, you can write the words "goal met" in all caps. If you are choosing that to be a met goal, if you want to change the goal and you think they have further progress to go, you can actually change the goal, and then you would write that in your narrative section. So down here in the narrative section, you want to detail anything that you did not detail in the note prior. Any changes you made to the goals, anything like that, any communication you had that you wanted to do more detail, or anything that you wrote up in the chart that you want to add more detail to. I wouldn't write too much detail in the chart. I would be specific, but I would add more detail in the narrative section just so the chart doesn't get too cluttered. And then in the bottom with the impairments, you're just going to mark off what their impairments were in each of the categories at the bottom. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then under comments there, you want to just detail anything that you want to note, any changes or improvements, declines from session to session in their judgment, and all these things, coping skills that will affect your care plan and affect their carryover. So the last part is the therapy reassessment addendum, and this is going to apply, of course, to PT, OT, speech, all the therapies when they do their reassessments. And I tried to make this as simple as possible for you. And also, it's a separate form. So the reason I made the therapy reassessment addendum a separate form so that it would be easy to go back and fill in if you did happen to forget. I'm hoping nobody forgets to do it on time, but if it did happen to get overlooked, you do not have to delete your whole form out and do a separate one. You can just add this addendum, which is nice. So on this addendum, very clear. You're going to talk about what goals that you have added since the last reassessment or since the evaluation. So anything that you have done since your last time that you did an assessment, an eval, or a reassessment with this patient, you want to detail specifically, not just, you don't want to write just general things. You actually want to write the goal out that you've added and the reason you added it. Same thing with modified. Any goal that you modified, the reason you modified it. Any goal that you terminated and the reason you terminated it. This is going to show the auditors, and in the chart, it's going to really tell the story and really show that you're modifying things for this patient throughout their care as their progress changes and as their functional status changes. Any goals that were met, you actually want to list those out here. So it should be a summary of what happened to this patient since your evaluation or since your last reassessment. Don't just skim over it and use canned phrases like progressing nicely or tolerating well. You want to actually repeat and rewrite the statements and the goals that you modified, terminated, reached. In the rationale for continued treatment, you want to be very specific. What is their reasonable expectations? Why are you continuing them? Why do they have these reasonable expectations? And you want to make sure you add any and all barriers that they have to their treatment and what you're doing about them. Cognitive, physical, environmental, support systems, and there are examples on that note that may be helpful. The reason for slower inconsistent progress, why are there variances? Why are they having setbacks? Any reason at all, not just functional, cognitive support systems. And your plans, you want to write exactly what you're planning on doing with this patient, exact orders. So I finished the note, and I just want to add that I'm really trying my best to meet the regulations as well as make things easier for you. These are not set in stone. Please provide immediate feedback after this video or feedback as you are starting to fill the notes, and DeVero, I will make sure they make the modifications as they can within the limitations of the software. As far as the mapping is concerned, things will map over from note to note. Do not be lazy. If I see trends where people are not changing things note to note, they can be removed. The mapping can be removed on certain fields. If you feel that a mapping on a field should be removed, let me know. It cannot be removed for specific clinicians. It has to be all staff or no staff, so it will be across the board if somebody does get lazy. Thank you for your time, and I hope this was helpful.